In order to have a solo role-playing adventure with an AI GM, you're going to need an AI. And for this, I am using NovelAI. When you come into NovelAI, you're going to see this screen. So we're going to click on Storyteller. The first thing you'll see is this blank screen. But don't panic. If you don't know what you want to have an adventure about, the AI can help you with the process of even thinking up ideas. This button here will allow you to generate a random title for the story. If you're stuck, click this button to get some ideas. It took some time to get something that I wanted, but eventually this came up. Okay, we now have our title. So let's prompt the AI by giving it some behind-the-scenes direction to help define what our adventure with the AI GM is going to be about. For that, we are going to use brackets. This is a common way in NovelAI to start a new story or adventure or writing of any sort, with an author, title, tags, and genre. But don't let this limit you. There are a lot of other things that you can put in these brackets to direct the AI as to the type of adventure you wish to have. For example, you could put in setting, Forgotten Realms, or you could say style, lyrical or poetic. You could put tone, dark and brooding. You can put other attributes in here that you can think of. And with a little help from the AI, you will see that it might actually give you some of those attributes on its own. Let me show you. First up is author. The author is really up to whatever you'd like to put in here. I recommend, though, being creative with the authors and combining maybe two authors that are entirely different, so you get a lot of different influence in your story. It doesn't mean that the story will be written exactly the way they would write, but it does influence the output. And if you're concerned about your AI being kind of boring, this is one of the ways in which you can spice up the outputs that you get. For example, you might try Dave Barry, who is very comedic, with Hunter S. Thompson, for example. It just put in whatever happens to interest you. Put in whatever authors that you like. However, you don't even need to use the author tag or the title tag or the tags or the genre. You can put one or all of these tags in here. For this example, I'm going to take the author out, as there's no particular author that I'm thinking of for this saga. Next, let's do the tags. It's important to keep in mind that between each section you have a semicolon and a space, and no semicolon at the end. Also in your brackets, keep in mind that you need a space between the first bracket and the word, and the last bracket and the word. Now let's input some tags. There are some tags that I'm going to recommend that you input that will make it clear to the AI what type of experience you want to have, and will also encourage the AI to speak as a GM. In other words, saying, you do this and you do that, or this is what happens to you, as opposed to having the GM write like it's a story. So I recommend using the following tags. These are a few that will indicate that you're looking for a solo role play experience that's played like a game. After this, you can then add in what type of style you want to go for, like if you want to go for fantasy or if you want to go for space or whatever it is. You can enter that in if you're already clear. But if you're not, the fun thing is that the AI can help you build the story right from the get-go, and it helps fill in the tags. So go ahead and press send. I'm going to trim out some of the words here, and then I'm going to generate a few more times to see what else it gives me. I've generated a few more tags, and on its own, the AI gave me a setting, sword and sorcery, and a genre, RPG, fantasy, medieval, action, adventure, and slice of life. I actually like all of these, so I'm just going to keep it as is. To close off the brackets, I'm going to remove the final period, place a space, and the final bracket. And we now have some tags that give us a direction as to where we are going to go with this adventure. But we need to lock this in by placing it into the memory section. On the right-hand side, there is a memory here. Items placed in this area here, words placed here, will be better remembered by the AI. Copy all of this and paste it in. The next step in starting your AI GM solo roleplay adventure is very simple. Type in the word player and a space. This is where you're going to begin your adventure. And I like to start my adventures out by simply, as I would at the beginning of any tabletop session where we were all just starting, that I would tell the GM who I am, who my character is, what any important information about my character. But if you don't know what that is, don't worry. I'm going to show you how to generate that using an oracle as well. And that brings me to oracles. I mentioned that you could play all of this on your mobile phone. I have an Android, and so I'm going to be showing you a few apps that I use to generate content. As a solo role player, to replace the role of a GM, you will use GM emulators or oracles, so that the questions that you would normally ask to a GM, such as I try and climb this wall. Do I succeed? Or describe this dungeon room I'm in. Those things can be done by the AI or with your own imagination using the help of oracles and GM emulators. The first app I'm going to show you is an app called GM's Toolkit. This is Game Master's Toolkit. It is an app that costs 99 cents to unlock a few extra features. It's well worth the 99 cents. I use it all the time. In this case, we first need a character or even a name. We could get a name by going to the quick generator and getting some NPC names. But I'm thinking of a name that could be for a female character. So let me show you the other GM emulator that I use all the time. This is GM's Apprentice, and it has so many things in one beautifully designed page, which, by the way, looks fantastic on mobile as well. And since all I do is play solo role-playing with my AI GM on mobile, I can tell you it works really well. The GM's Apprentice emulator is chocked full of all kinds of ways to emulate a GM, answer questions, or randomize things to feed to the AI and get a very interesting output. For example, over here you have runes, you have elements, 3 different words, which I'll show you how to use. The mythic event generator. This is if you want to change a scene or influence a scene. Also, when you roll odds, you'll sometimes get no plus an event. This is the event that it's referring to. We'll be able to feed that to the AI as well. There are different senses, and down here are different sections. If you play Iron Sworn or Iron Sworn Delve, there's also information neatly packed in here as well. If you hover over something, it'll even tell you where in the Iron Sworn guide this information is. For this, we want to pick some names. Oh, Hadley Brightmane. That sounds like a great name. So let's use that. I like that I am a healer. I like this. So let's be a healer. So I could take all of this and put it right into NovelAI, but I'm going to show you another way that I tend to use. In the Game Master's Toolkit, there's an area for NPCs. You can choose a random ancestry, or you can pick something. Okay, we have something here, and I was particularly looking for an interesting motivation. This motivation of personal redemption sounds good, so let's use it. I'm going to click on Save to make sure I don't lose that NPC, and then I'm going to click on Edit. Once I have all of that copied into my clipboard, I'm now going to add it as a character sheet or a way of tracking the information in the game. And for that, we're going to use the lore book. The lore book will serve two different functions. For the AI's function, it will help the AI remember information that is not currently in context. So what that means is if you're playing a lengthy adventure and you mention something that happens at the beginning of the story, the AI will not remember that information several chapters in. It has a limited context that it can send in order to receive a matching or corresponding output. So, the way that you can help it remember that Count Braymane is from this area, an NPC that you met back in the first starting tavern, you would create a lore book entry on Count Braymane. However, you can also use it as a tool for keeping track of notes for your own memory. So, here are the categories that I suggest you set up when you're role playing with your AI GM. The categories are inventory, locations, notes, NPCs, party, as in yourself and who you're traveling with in your party, plots, and quests. However, the categories are not limited to this. You can make a category on anything. When you create a new lorebook entry, let's say for notes, unless you put in an activation key, the entry will not influence the AI's generation output at all. So, if you just want to have an entry to keep notes, simply make one. And you'll be able to keep all of your notes in one place. Because there's no activation key, it will never actually show up in the output of the generation. But we are going to create an entry about our character. I'm going to copy and paste the information that I got from my Android app and put in the name of the character, changing a few details to suit what we already know about her. Now we'll need to put her name into the activation keys. I suggest putting it in like this, her full name and her first name. Now that we understand that she is a healer and what her motivation is, let's get her into the world. So I've written a little prompt here. Again, with each part of these prompts, you don't have to completely write it yourself. That's kind of one of the joys of working with an AI. You can sometimes have the AI write it for you, just by giving it a little bit of information and then asking it to fill it out. For example, you could say, my name is Hadley Brightmane, and I am a healer of the Temple of, and have it give a name. At this stage of the creation of your AI roleplay adventure, you may want to, if you're asking the AI to help you fill out things like names and locations, that you lower the generation output length and make it, say, 50 characters or 40 characters so that you can help keep the AI a little bit more on track when you want it to generate things that are short and to the point. Then bring it back up to its default 160 when you're ready to get into the story. Now comes the next step, to put us into the world. Hadley lives somewhere, presumably, and has a life, and is currently taking actions, doing something, and it's time to figure out what those things are. But to make it more exciting and interesting, I suggest starting your character out in media res. That means in the middle of action, or in this case, in some hot water. Let's have something exciting happening. This will help you get things fleshed out, but also get the adventure started right off the bat. There are a couple of ways that you can do that. You can either ask the AI by seeding it with something like, I find myself in some serious trouble. I turn around and see, or something like that. I find it more fun to do it by telling the GM what it is I'm sensing, experiencing, what's going on around me without describing it, just what I am experiencing. What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I smelling? What am I feeling? So for that, the good old GM's apprentice will come to the rescue. You can also start off your adventure with a quest of some sort, and there are a lot of different random tables to give you random quests. But I'm going to start out by describing some of what she is sensing and experiencing around her in the current moment. I have added the 3 senses I wanted to use into a sentence, which means that there's probably a lot going on. She's smelling some burning hair, there's a tickling on the back of her neck, and she can only see mountaintops obscured by clouds. There are all different places where she could be. And it's now the GM's turn. We're still in the prompting stage. After a while, the model that I am using, which by the way, is the model available at the highest tier, Crake. However, the model at the lower tier, Uterp, can also be used as an AI GM as well. And my understanding is that it does a fairly good job. But I find Crake to be much more powerful and a lot better at producing a real GM experience. However, Crake needs a good amount of prompting before it can go off on its own. Maybe 3 to 4 paragraphs, and you may need to add in the word GM a couple of times in order for it to get it. But once it does pick up on what it is that you want to do and how you want the content to be outputted, it's off to the races, and you don't have to correct it too often. We're going to start with GM and then hit send. Here is the first generation I got, and you can see that it is not what I'm looking for. So you can either retry, but a simpler method is we want the GM to describe what's going on around us. Let's prompt it a little bit until it gets the point. I got a couple of generations, which will allow me to show you the retry and undo button. If the GM gives you something that you don't like, just click retry. It'll show you the amount of content that is going to be replaced. But if you decide and change your mind and want to go back, just hit the undo button. That will show you all of the recent generations that you have done with the retry button, and you can pick something else. The GM first started me over here by a campfire, and there was an overturned wagon, but I like this generation that it has done where I'm at the base of a mountain range, and you can see that it is already asking me a question, just like a real GM would. Now, I still smell burning hair, and I still feel a tickling on the back of my neck, and I want to investigate that. So let's reply. Now, this is a game. We're playing a solo roleplay adventure, which includes dice rolling and random tables. You could go back and forth with the GM like this, but we want to influence the GM with new information. This is where the role comes into play. Over here in my copy-paste app, I'm using Ditto on my PC. This is how you will enter a role. You can do it some other way and name it something else in the brackets. There's no specific thing that states that you have to name it like this, but this is the method I have found that works really well. Now, we're going to decide which direction the burning hair is coming from and indicate that to the AI, and then see what it does with that information. Directions can be determined here on the GM's apprentice. I'm going to roll. And it seems like the direction is coming from my right. I could also use this to indicate cardinal directions like east. I'm going to put in my right and see if it comes up with a cardinal direction on its own. Again, for the first few generations, I'm going to put in the word GM in order to let it know that it is the GM's turn. So it has given us east, or in this case, northeast, where I detect smoke blowing out of a small cottage. Now you'll see that the GM is starting to try and play the turn for me, telling me that I approach and telling me I move in that direction. All you need to do is just erase this. Over time, it will stop doing that as you train it basically on what it is you want to do. And then there are also times where if I'm particularly tired or the GM has given me some information that is pretty interesting that I do or say, I just leave it in. I can stop here, or I can allow the GM to go on and maybe give me a little bit more. Until it does this. I was waiting for it to do this to show you how to stop the GM from playing your turn, which is one of the problems I had with the text-based adventure module that comes with NovelAI. It's really quite simple. Head over here, take this out, and we're going to grab the word player and colon. Under Advanced, scroll down to Stop Sequence. Put player in, add it, and from that point on, the AI will render the word player, but it will stop there. And then it becomes as if the GM is saying, I've said as much as I'm going to say about this. It's your turn now. It's already asking me again, what do you do? So I'm going to tell it. I wanted to give my character some pack or some kind of weapon, so I've given her a quarterstaff. If you were using something like D&D 5e, you would just indicate in the text whatever it is you've given your character from her character sheet. You can also use the lore book as a type of character sheet. You could put in what she currently has in her inventory, or you could actually add another section up here to keep track of her inventory, much like you would do in a video game. A tip on getting good AI generation. If you leave the cursor at the end of your paragraph, the AI will continue to talk for you, as you can see. Now, is there anything else notable nearby is actually a pretty good question, so I'm going to keep it. But in the case where you don't want the AI to continue talking for you, which should be all the time, all you need to do is hit the Enter key. After playing for a while, you'll get very used to just typing in your input really quickly and then hitting the Enter key as a matter of course. Now it's time to add in some more different types of roles. Is the cottage on fire is a question, so let's get a yes, no, or other type of answer to give to the GM. You can head over to the Game Master's Apprentice and roll for it, determining yourself the likelihood of whether the cottage is on fire. And by this, it looks like it absolutely is on fire. But there's another tool that I want to show you that can give you some interesting answers to yes-no questions. This tool is called Adventure Smith, and it has a lot of random tables from all different types of games and rule sets and even subreddits. I have taken the time to fill out all of the favorites, going through every single section. It took a while to create all of these favorites for combats and magic and location. These will not be here if you get this app, which by the way is free. And you'll need to set it up yourself, unfortunately. And it's a little bit of a pain in the rear, but it's worth it. I'm going to go over to probability, where I have all the different areas where I can roll different things. This is the Mythic Fate chart. The gear here indicates what odds you could choose. You could choose 50-50 here and roll for that. Well, that cottage is really on fire. Or this is Solum. I like this one because it will frequently give you yes and nothing significant happens. So you can then take this whole bit of text here, press down on it, use the share, and I have an app called Copy to Clipboard. So I will frequently use this app to copy this in and then head on over to NovelAI screen and copy it in. A note on this, when you're using brackets, they all need to be on the same line or at least no new line added. So for this, I would have to do that and then enter. But there is one more tool to show you. In the Game Master's Toolkit, under Quick Generator, there is Oracle Result. And this is the one that I'm going to use. Partly I use this one because it is the easiest to copy and paste with the least amount of formatting trouble. I have noticed that the parentheses here don't do well in the roll, and I found it confused the AI a little bit, so I just remove them and put this text in. Let's see what good happens. The GM, after a few retries, finally gave us a lone man on the edge of the wood covering of the chimney. So we now have a problem. I don't know if we're strong enough to climb up there and get onto that roof, but let's see if we can solve that problem with another type of oracle. The adventure has continued on a little while with an explosion and both men, one whom I had called for help and the other who was on the roof, being blown away. As a healer, I want to help them. But the adventure is definitely continuing because the man, one of them, is pointing back towards the burning cottage. This is an example to show you another type of roll. This roll is a random word generation roll. I find that this roll is very good for just adding in something extra or interesting. If I ask the AI to describe something, I'll throw in some rolls. Or if I ask the AI to tell me what someone says, I'll throw in a roll. It's just general, great, all-purpose roll. There are different things that you can choose here for the words: very common, common, somewhat uncommon. And I invite you to play with this. Try some very obscure words and see if the AI is familiar with these words and what they give you. I'm going to go for average and roll until I get something. And also keep in mind that the words don't have to have anything to do with what's going on in the current adventure. You'll be very surprised at how the AI will use the words to come up with new things to give you. Since we have a lot of danger going on in this, and this person's a healer, let's put in rebellious, bruised, distanced, and see what we get. When putting in the words, I always add commas between each word to indicate that each word is separate and not part of one big phrase. Well, finally, some help has arrived in the form of 3 knights. If you're really just unsure as to where you want to take things next, or your character is at a place where there's nothing really going on at the moment, there are a few things that can help you. There are lots of random encounter tables, but there are 2 that I particularly like that I have created at Chartopia. The first one is short counters for short attention spans. These are fun little off-the-cuff things, kind of slice of life things. A hero gains a temporary ability to understand what animals are saying. Things like that. I'm going to do a few rolls to give you some examples. A melon-sized eyeball rolls across the floor. A goblin runs up to a male character jabbering, "Daddy, daddy." Fun things like that that you can add in. And you can even do them as simply as doing this. Passers-by point at the heroes and then laugh over some unexplained joke. And sure enough, the GM describes that by having some locals gather around who are now laughing at one of the young knights being helped by a man or traveling merchant. So some more people have gathered, and we can ask those people to help us with the 2 men who are injured from the fire. At that point, you can go ahead and ask more questions of the GM. Remember to ask descriptive questions like, what happens next? Or do what I like to call the setup and describe. You simply tell your AI GM what it is that you do, and then ask it to describe the scene. I really like this when I'm playing the game late at night before bed and I'm really tired and I don't really want to write out my whole part of the scene. I can just set it up and then ask the AI to describe it. The AI GM has given us an excellent description of the scene of what happened with the knights. At the beginning of this video, I told you that I would give you an example of some actual play with the AI GM. This is an adventure that I have been doing in which I generated it pretty much exactly the way I've told you to do so, starting out with some tags. These tags have given me some great comedy and wonderful times, so if you want to copy them, go right ahead. In this adventure, my character's name is Ella, and she's a half-ranger. We receive a quest from someone in order to go and take care of some kobolds. Because I needed to get a mercenary to help me take care of these goblins, as I am a tender little ranger just out on my first adventure, I go to the tavern and find Varen Main, and he's a bard. That will be important later on. You can see here that I am rolling on things to influence and guide the story and add in some new unexpected events. In this case, we set off on our quests, and I asked, does anything interesting happen on the way? I got yes as an answer, and so I put in the roll. You can see here that I rolled focus, NPC action, divide, subject, and a representative. For this one, I wanted to interpret that role rather than allowing the AI GM to do so, and I determined that it meant that an NPC action, which would be Varen Main, he wanted to divide us, and that a subject was a representative. I thought, well, what if it is that Varen tells me that he has a friend that he wants to come along on this adventure, and that if I do not accept, he will abandon me. And then, as you can see, I asked the GM to describe the scene, which it did very well, introducing a new NPC. A dwarf male. I've noticed that the GM will tend to make everyone human, so I just changed it to dwarf. I rolled for his name and added it in because the GM originally just called this person NPC. I gave him a name, and then the story continued on. Once we reached the cave opening where the kobolds were living, I asked if we saw any kobolds at the cave entrance. We got a little bit more information there, and then my character said, let's make a plan. Varen agreed and said that he would make a diversion. This diversion ended up being magnificent. As we went into the cave and battle began, I wanted to see if Varen and Thingol were joining in. Sure enough, they were. Varen was using some magic, and Thingol was using his axe. At this point in the combat, I wanted something to happen, to up the stakes. So I went over to GM's apprentice and rolled for what I would be hearing. I heard drums. So I typed in, I hear drums deeper in the caves. The GM continued on by describing what those drum beats were. There are several loud drum beats echoing through the tunnel ahead. Varen moves to the front of the group and begins singing loudly about his exploits underground. As he sings, he waves his arms wildly in the air and spins around. The effect is rather comical, but also draws attention from the kobolds hiding in the distance. Well, I wanted a distraction. I got a distraction. And then at this point, the AI, completely on its own, had Varen, who was a bard, remember, start singing. To make it clear, all of the text that you see in the white is the text from the AI. The purple is the text from me. So Varen began to sing several verses of a ballad. What astounded me is that each of the verses sounded exactly like a ballad, complete with lines that stayed the same each time. I went underground to a place called Undermountain. I walked underground to a place called Undermountain. And he sang verses, but not only that, the AI had him sing louder, continuing on. At this point, I realize that this is Varen's distraction, and an excellent distraction it is. And the GM goes ahead and actually describes Varen continuing to sing his song while waving his hands in the air as if he is trying to distract a swarm of bees. You see Thingol stand up and shout in a booming voice, "Kobolds here to die!" Then he charges forward, swinging his great axe in a wide arc. Thingol runs through the ranks of startled kobolds, knocking them aside with his powerful strikes. Thingol screams in rage as he cuts down his enemies with his mighty blade, while Varen, his friend, continues to sing a beautiful ballad about being down in the darkest of places where even the sun never shines. He continues getting softer and softer and softer until Thingol, Ice Shield, jumps in, not yelling. Notice the AI said singing loudly, Kobolds here to die, kill them all, and a duet begins, Varen singing loudly, I went underground to a place called Undermountain. He sings louder, and then he finally ends in a deafening crescendo. I've been down to the darkest of places. And Thingol Iceshield joins in, grunting as he is killing kobolds left and right. Kobolds here to die, kill them all, kill them all. The fight is fierce, but after a few moments, the kobolds flee into the cave system. Thingol follows them and slays several more before they escape. And Varen ends his ballad on a sad note. He's singing loudly once more, I've been down to the darkest of places, where even the sun never shines. I stared in wonder at Varen and Thingol as they distracted and slaughtered most of the kobolds and the rest run away. I tell them, that was amazing, and I began applauding enthusiastically. Thingol Iceshield says, yes it was. Let's go home now. I want to get some sleep. Maybe I'll have another dream. Thingol walks off towards the cave entrance. Varen follows him, humming a tune. Thingol looks back to you and says, you should come visit my home sometime. I would like to show you where I live. He exits the cave, leaving Varen behind. You see Varen stop singing and sit down on a rock, sighing deeply. After a moment, he stands up and heads for the exit as well. And that was the end of that scene. The 3 asterisks denote to the AI that the scene is completed and that we are now moving on to another part of our adventure, which goes on and on as the road goes on and on. If you would like to have me play more actual role play with an AI GM, do more solo role playing for you, let me know in the comments below. And also let me know what adventure you would like to see.